What's going on, everyone? Volton here, and it is that time of the year again, list season, the time of year where we all get together and talk about some of our favorite musical releases of the calendar year. And let me tell you, the top 30 list this year was quite difficult to construct, and those videos are going to be coming soon after this video has been completed. In this video, we're going to be talking about the honorable mentions and personal favorites that didn't quite make it to the top 30 that are still great enough to be talked about and mentioned. Some of these albums could have very well made it to the top 30 list. There just happen to be others that happen to knock them off the tier, but still nonetheless need to be talked about. So, without further ado, let's not waste any more time. I'm sure you're all excited. Let's dive into the honorable mentions here on Volton's Music Reviews 2015. First up on this list is going to be a crowdfunded album that I discovered through one of my most frequented metal forums, and I'm glad I discovered this. This is some really good stuff. This is No More Pain with the Post-Human Condition. A terrific album. I wasn't actually a contributor to this album. I pretty much found out about it after it was completed, but I listened to this on their CD, baby, and instantly drew me enough to buy myself a copy. This was a tremendous album. Progressive rock, progressive metal, really young, talented individuals. I really hope this band gets some exposure from this video because this album was tremendous, and hopefully they get some talk in the new year, 2016, and get to playing some shows around here. I would love to see them. So, Post-Human Condition by No More Pain on the honorable mentions list, kicking it off. Great stuff. Next up is going to be one of my favorite EPs of the year. Discovered this band through my good buddy Sean Count Blagareth, and he really liked this one quite a lot, so I have a feeling it's going to be a lot higher on his list than mine, but nonetheless, a great listen for me. And this is Grimoire with, alright, give me a break with this one, Les Arrêts des Spectres Rêveurs. It's French, so I don't really know it too much, but this was a tremendous album. This is actually an EP. One of the things that held this back for me is I wish that it was longer. This was so good that when it ends, it actually kind of frustrates me because I wish there was more, because this had tremendous variety. This is very atmospheric black metal with some real beautiful segments. Not too much reverb to where everything starts to bleed into one another, because this does have a lot of lush detail, but terrific release nonetheless. This is my first exposure to Grimoire, and I'm very glad to have heard this. This was a tremendous EP of the year, for sure. Next up on the list is going to be an album that was almost a disappointment for me, but one that kind of grew on me more as we go. Different take for the band, and definitely a new chapter being written for this band as well. This is Coheed and Cambria with The Color Before the Sun. Now, this was their first album away from their concept. Coheed and Cambria are a concept band, and they have the whole Amory Wars saga. And I guess Claudio wanted to do something different with this record and kind of write standalone songs that had nothing to do with the concept, and they dove into some variety with this. A lot of the songs were on here quite mellow, kind of ballady. There were some tremendous cuts. From Here to Mars, Atlas is one of my favorite songs of the year and one of their best songs to date, I think. You Got Spirit Kid was a funny, catchy thing, and I'm sure this will open up a little bit more with time, but I guess this was sort of a watershed moment for the band, and something they probably just had to get out of their system. So I'm glad I got to hear this, and we'll see where they go in the future. So, Coheed and Cambria with The Color Before the Sun. Next up on this list is kind of in the same vein as the last one. Slightly disappointed, but again, still liking it very much over time. And actually, that kind of makes sense. This is Enslaved with In Times, and again, I kind of feel like their last album was a lot stronger. The album before that was terrific. Their album before that was terrific. They're on a great streak right now. I just think that this one fell a little bit short based on the significance of their last album. Their last album was quite good, and I think that this one came out a little bit too quick after the last one. I think if they worked on this a little bit more, it could have been just as good, if not better, than the last album. I think over the course of listening to this a little bit more, it'll become one of my top favorite albums from them, but for now it's still an honorable mention. I know this album is a lot higher on most people's lists, but for me, still great to talk about as an honorable mention. So, Enslaved with In Times. Moving on, we have another kind of slight disappointment, but still great album. This seems to be kind of the common theme with a lot of these, which was a reason why they didn't quite make it to the top list. And this is a band that showed up on the last year's list, but in a different kind of light. This is Terrae with Her Halo. This band was very high on the last list with a tremendous record, Esoteric Symbolism. But since then, their singer happened to leave the band, which was one of the reasons why I love their last record so much. That singer was a great fit for them. Whatever the reason is, they have a new singer on this album. Kind of reminded me a little bit of Anubis Gates and a lot of the more recent Circus Maximus stuff, which isn't a bad thing, but I kind of feel like it gives this album a little bit less of an identity. This is a little bit more mellow. It's got a lot more acoustic moments, a little bit more of a stripped down sort of feel, especially for Terrae, which is a little bit more technical, a little bit more hard hitting than this. Still a tremendous disc. This is a concept album. I feel like I haven't given this much of a shot. I feel like if I listened to this more, it could have been a little bit higher, but still nonetheless needed to be talked about. Progressive metal release, one of the best of the year for sure. What did you think of Terrae's Her Halo, if you've heard it? Next up on this list is a really unique one, some new fashioned black and roll, and it's also got some progressive metal elements in there as well. This is Tribulation with The Children of the Night. Found out about this through one of my YouTube buddies, Christian Albers. Very glad that he had mentioned this, because I probably would have completely missed this had he not mentioned it. This is some really cool stuff. Black metal fused with rock and roll, fused with progressive rock. This is a real fun listen. Super catchy, super groovy. Got a lot of great hooks and pretty high energy stuff with some great variety and some breaks in between. This almost made it to the top list, but I kind of feel like it didn't have enough variety as what I would have liked. This one was on heavy rotation towards the end of the year. There's still on the list, a really fun release to check out if you're into some really catchy rock and roll, metal, prog, black metal, all mixed together. Works very, very well with this. Definitely check out Tribulation, The Children of the Night. Next up is a band that is quite different than some of the bands we've talked about so far on this list. This is The Deer Hunter with Act 4, Rebirth in Reprise. The Deer Hunter finally going back to their concept of the deer misleading storyline. They've kind of got off track with the last few releases with the Color Spectrum and the Migrant record, kind of like what Coheed did with The Color Before the Sun, kind of getting off the concept for a while but coming back. This is a great return to form and a lot of symphonic elements added on this time around. And I gotta say, some of it was a little bit dry and soft, but I think that with time this is going to open up a lot more. I thought that the first two parts of this series were terrific. 3 was a little bit of a dip, and 4 is a return to form for sure. Glad to check out this album, and terrific artwork on this. Casey and the boys definitely did not skimp on that. And one that I don't think a lot of metal fans are going to like. This might be too light for a lot of them, but it's got some great symphonic moments and a lot of kind of cabaret vocal style. That's kind of what Deer Hunter have always kind of done, but this one is a little bit more full of that, and that's fine. This is a unique release, definitely one that deserved to be talked about, so glad to have heard it. This is The Deer Hunter with Act 4, Rebirth in Reprise. And moving into more progressive rock territory, this is a man that is a legend in the classic age of progressive rock. This is Steve Hackett with his new solo album called Wolflight. Steve Hackett being the original lead guitarist of Genesis, if you were unfamiliar. And he has done quite a number of solo albums over the years, but this is one of the more recent ones that have really kind of caught my attention. This was a tremendous release. Very big, grandiose, cinematic production, very symphonic in certain tracks. Wolflight and Love Song to a Vampire, just terrific tracks. Love Song to a Vampire also featuring Chris Squire, the late Chris Squire, unfortunately, on bass guitar from Yes. Rest in peace, brother. This must have been one of the last recordings he was featured on, and what a song that is. Absolutely tremendous. It's a very well-constructed record with a lot of great dips and dives and a lot of great variety in his guitar playing. So if you're into Steve Hackett and Genesis and haven't heard him for a while, this is a great way to get back into him And check out Wolflight. It's very symphonic. Kind of want to play Skyrim as you're listening to it. It'll fit quite well. We got 3 more to talk about. This next one is another prog rock opus. I've talked about him before, a couple different settings. We're going to talk about him again. This is Neil Morse with the Neil Morse Band, The Grand Experiment. And he kind of always does these sorts of long-winded progressive rock albums, but I guess this time they kind of just went into this studio completely without ideas, and this is what happened to come out, hence The Grand Experiment. I really was a fan of the way they did that, simple but effective on the CD. Got some great songs on here, but I don't think it really warranted itself as a grand experiment. It seems to be a little bit typical for Neil at this point in his career. I just kind of feel like they could have pushed the envelope a little bit more with this to be considered this title, but again, having one of the best prog rock epics of the year alive again, this album definitely had to be mentioned, and as always with the Neil Morse album, so terrific stuff as always. Coming down to the last 2 here, we have one that was a tremendous return to form and a pleasure to listen to. Almost made it to the top 30 list, but just got knocked down by a couple that were better than this. And this was such a pleasure to hear. Return to form for the progressive metal pioneers, Queensryche with Condition Human. Getting Todd La Torre on board has revitalized this band to a degree which has nearly brought them back in time and forward in time at the same time. Whoa, man. But for real, it's fresh, it's got energy, it's got versatility all over again. Todd La Torre has got some pipes, and if you really close your eyes, it does sound a lot like Jeff Tate, so much that it's almost scary. I feel like their first album with Todd La Torre, the self-titled that came out just a couple of years ago, was a great album, but this one is really showing what this band's future has in store for them. Great return to form, an absolute pleasure to listen to, and one's going to be on heavy repeat for quite some time. So Queensryche, The Human Condition, definitely a great honorable mention for this year, 2015. And to finish off the list, this was one that I had to really kind of weigh and balance to whether it's going to be on the honorable mentions list or on the top 30 list. And this was the second release, but the first full-length release from this project, and one that I spoke very highly of the last time as an EP. But this is the new full-length from Mestis called Polysemy, and this is the instrumental progressive rock project of Javier Reyes of Animals as Leaders. Now, what makes Mestis so unique is that this is progressive metal, instrumental progressive metal, kind of the new gent variety, but it's mixed with Latin styles and Latin melodies, Latin grooves. I feel that with this one, it was a little bit more metal related. He even had some of the thumping technique that was used in the Animals as Leaders tracks. I feel like this will appeal more to fans of Animals as Leaders more than the first Mestis record, which is a little bit strange to say because I feel like Mestis had a little bit more of an identity aside from Animals as Leaders, but this sounds a little bit too much like Animals as Leaders at times to be justified as a different project for me. For what we got here, it was still a great record. Again, it was very hard to keep it on, keep it off, but I think that this is nonetheless a great honorable mention, regardless of my critiques of it. And it's still an album to check out if you are a fan of Animals as Leaders and want a little bit more of that style. Definitely check it out if you are interested. So that's going to do it for the honorable mentions portion of this year-end wrap-up. And I know I kind of critiqued a lot of these, but for the purposes of this video, these were sort of the reasons as to why they didn't make it to the actual top 30 list. So take these critiques as a grain of salt. I don't think negatively of any of these albums by any means, and certainly check out each and every one of them if you haven't already and they sound intriguing to you. So stay tuned for the top 30 list videos coming soon. These are going to be a lot of fun, and we have a lot of great music in store to talk about very soon. So stay tuned for those videos and dive into some of this music if it completely slipped under your radar. So happy listening, and I will see you in the next video. Take care, everyone.